Hey there guys, we're going to take a look this week at a fun deck. We're kind of playing around with Enters the Battlefield effects. Now, we talked about a lot of the really great things that we can do. We've actually seen a couple of Esper things come around, and those are really popular because of the fact that you can abuse Blink. Momentary Blink is a great card, allows you to immediately remove and return a creature from play. And it works really great. You get a flashback ability, which makes it 2 spells in 1 card, and we can't say enough great stuff about that. But we also have stuff like Core Skyfisher, and that ability is more like what we are focusing on today. And the Core Skyfisher is one that allows you to play a creature that is a pretty good size for a really cheap cost, and it's considered a drawback that you have to return a permanent to hand. Now, this is a similar effect to a cycle of creatures that we saw back in Plane Shift, and I kind of talk about those in the article there, and these are the 2 that I really grasped onto. There are 4 of the 5 which are actually fall into that category of being pretty good as far as power to cost ratio. You see here the Horned Kavu, for example. It is a 2-cost creature, and it does come in at a 3/4 size. And that's pretty great. You don't usually see a 2-cost creature for that kind of size. But they do have a drawback to them, and the first drawback is, of course, the fact that they run 2 different colors of mana. You are required to pay a red and a green to put this guy into play. Now, if it was multiple mana symbols and they were the same color, it is difficult to get that going, but it is less difficult than multiple mana symbols that are of differing colors, obviously. You take a look at Cavern Harpies, and that is another one from this set. That is the blue and black flyer, and that is used a lot in like Legacy and Vintage formats, where it can be comboed with Allurin to win games. And that is not as difficult because you get a lot of access to other kind of mana fixes. You get your dual lands, and those can be kind of cheated into play. When we look at Pauper and you restrict yourself to commons, it's not so easy to cheat things into play. So in order to use 2 colors, we have to be really efficient. We do get these guild gates, and they're kind of our dual lands these days, but we really have to be smart about how we fetch lands, and we have to be looking to really balance things out. What we're going to do, and this is kind of inspired, I looked at the set of 5 creatures, and I do love these 2 specifically. And Horn Kavu is a great power, a great size, and it really keeps the mana curve down. And what really worked out with this is the guild gates, and I wanted to bring in the guild gates because, like I said, we don't have access to dual lands, so the guild gates are kind of the closest thing we have. Now, when you look at what we have available to us currently, because we still have not seen Gate Crash, though it will fill in the remaining blanks for the guild gates, what we have access to now is Rakdos and Golgari. So it doesn't actually, this would be Gruul, the red and green. And again, we won't see that till Gate Crash. So we can actually tutor up guild gates. We have the Gatecreeper Vines give us that ability to finally tutor out our own dual lands in Pauper. So if we go this route, we are going to take a little bit of a risk here and bring in a 3rd color. I'm going to go kind of light on the 3rd color for the most part. I'm only running 2 colors of the Lava Zombie here. I'm sorry, 2 copies of the Lava Zombie there, because we will get the black off of these. We're almost required to have it because, you know, Golgari and Rakdos share that color. But I really still wanted the focus to be the green and red. Most importantly, green here, I guess, because of the fact that it gets us these Gatecreeper Vines, and it's going to help us to build up our mana base and really put that in perspective for us. So this was kind of the combination that really started things off here, is these 3 cards here. Like I said, Lava Zombie is something that I do want some replayability of those. I do like it. I mean, this is one of the few that actually has extra abilities to it. This one can pump up. You see there it has the pay 2 to go up +1/+0 until end of turn, which is really cool. So this is, I wanted them in there. It's a really great card, but I really still wanted the focus to be the green and red and the ability here. Now, we wanted to look into a lot of ways that we can play off of these Enter the Battlefield's effects. With these cards, the second drawback here on these is the fact that you have to return a creature to your hand that shares a color with this. So for example, the Horned Kavu, it is a red and green cost, and when it comes into play, you are required to return a green or red creature to your hand. Pretty simple. So what we're going to do is look at a lot of green, red, and black creatures that have Enter the Battlefield effects and kind of find what really cool things we can do with those. And there's a lot. There's a lot of great cards with Enter the Battlefield effects. I love kind of playing around with those. It's definitely one of the most fun mechanics. And we saw a lot of great stuff most recently in this draft block, where we got things like Cloud Shift and a lot of new abilities to blink creatures beyond Pauper. So what we're going to do is start off with these. When I'm playing black, of course, I've said this all the time, Phyrexian Rager is my go-to. It's a great draw spell. Pretty good ratio there. You're looking at a 3 cost for a 2/2. And more importantly, like I said, it's a cantrip, allows you to draw a card. But we also, because green is a really heavily favored color in this deck, I'm bringing in 3 copies of Elvish Visionary. Now, we don't have access to blue mana, obviously, because we're not running blue. So our options for draw spells are really not so great. There are some good options when it comes to black, things like Sign in Blood. But Sign in Blood requires us to run a double black cost. And if you see, take a look at this deck here, I really didn't want to go anything that had a double same colored cost. Things like Liliana Spectre and stuff I had considered because they do have that great come into play ability. However, you are running 3 colors here, so it can be very tricky to find a double black. It may be a little bit easier when you're using Gatecreeper Vine to search out lands, get 1 of each color, and kind of stabilize there. But when you are requiring yourself to run multiple things where they have double same colored costs, like the Spectre, then all of a sudden things get a little more hairy. You're really looking for 2 of a kind, and it gets a little messy. So it's a little safer to run things with a requirement of only 1 colored casting cost. These are the exception to the rule there, and like I said, it's the difference there is that they're not same colored. We can kind of spread things out and look for those different pieces. So what we're going to do for card draw is focus on the Rager and the Elvish Visionary, and these are both cantrips. They come into play, they draw a single card. Now, I didn't want to go out of hand here. I did try it at one point with 4 of each, and it just didn't seem that great. 4 is great. 4 is an ideal place to be for these cantrip creatures. We're kind of pushing it a little above and beyond, going to 6. Running it to 8 is definitely just a little too much. It kind of takes away from what else we can do with this deck. If you're using those extra 2 card spots, it's 2 card spots that you can't use on a lot of fun things like control abilities. And I did want to have a bit of a control aspect to this deck. It's definitely aggro based, but you look at this package over here, it's a little bit more controlling. Even our spells, trying to get a little bit of a control aspect going here, because it really needs to balance out with the creatures. It needs to give us an ability to attack through and do a little bit of a control on the tempo. So I felt that 6 was a pretty good place to be there. Another thing is with the Elvish Visionary, if you look at it, it is a cantrip. It is going to come into play relatively cheap, but we do have a 1/1 creature, and we're drawing a card off it, but again, 1/1 creature. It doesn't give us a lot of options in the mid to late game. A 1/1 is not going to trade for very much. It's most often going to be a chump blocker. It's going to have struggles attacking through to your opponent, depending what he has into play. 1/1s are okay, but they're not going to win you the game, is kind of where I'm going with this. So this is kind of our basis. We're going to have a lot of options for replaying these. 6 is a lot of cantrip, but we're also going to get the ability to use the Kavu and the Lava Zombie to return these 2 to our hands and replay them over and over. So we have a lot more potential to draw cards other than just 6. We will be able to replay those, hopefully. Now, when it comes to other enters the battlefield effects, these are kind of what I went with, and I went with a little bit of a control package. You see, I am running a full set of Ravenous Rats. I talked about Liliana Spectre, and I did like the discard. Just a little bit of disruption in the main deck I think is great. I really didn't want to focus on it and make discard the key here, but I did want an ability to kind of mess up an opponent's draw, kind of keep him off of maybe an extra draw spell or an extra kill, just reduce his hand here and there. And the fact that we can replay him off of the Lava Zombies is going to give us an ability to get a total of 6 discards off those. Good. It's a good place I like to be. If you look even at mono black control these days, it really doesn't run a lot in the way of discard. They will also run about 4 Ravenous Rats. They will use, of course, Chittering Rats to kind of disrupt things, but again, didn't want to go down that road of double black here. I think that running those 4 is great. They'll bring duress in the sideboard, but they don't focus a lot on stuff like distress anymore, or any of those other heavier discard spells. Now, we're also bringing in Sting Scourger and Gitu Slinger. These are a couple of really cool cards. I love these. They don't get a lot of play because of these echo costs. Now, the Slinger is like our Pauper version of Flametongue Kavu, and I think I've talked about that before. Comes into play, it allows you to do a shock basically to a creature or player. The echo cost on this one is a little more reasonable because it is the same as the casting cost, so it's not terrible if you wanted to play it in the early game. But what your ideal play here with these 2 is going to be finding ways to abuse this echo cost. Now, one way to do that is with our focus here on the Horned Kavu and the Lava Zombie. If you get to a point in the game, and ideally you want to be around 6 to 8 mana, 8 is even probably a little too much. You don't need that much. But you want to have enough land in place so that you can do something like play Get 2 Slinger. It comes into play, it does the damage, and then you follow it up with a Lava Zombie or Horned Kavu and return it to your hand. Now all of a sudden on the following turn, not only are you not required to pay that echo cost, but you will get a second chance to do a second shock off of that Slinger when you recast it. So that's pretty great. Same thing with the Sting Scourger. It allows you to basically boomerang a creature an opponent controls. So this one is a little more tough to play because of the fact that the echo is double what the cost of casting it is. So, that's not as efficient as the Slinger, but anyways, you still get that opportunity. You can put into play and bounce a creature and then use the Kavu and Zombie to return it so you don't have to pay the echoing cost next turn, and you can hold it again until later. Makes a great finisher, and having only 2 of these doesn't seem great, but when you get the option to replay these a total of 6 times, you have to consider that is basically a total of 8 casts. And then some, because we're going to look at another little trick I brought in here. The other way to abuse those is going to be these 4 unearths. Now, every single card in this deck, every creature card that is running at 3 or less for the mana cost. So all of a sudden I am running a full set of unearths because every single one of these creatures can be returned from the graveyard with unearth. And that's going to give us a lot of great options. With the echo cost here, if you do not pay an echo cost, the creature dies. So unearth will give you the ability to bring that creature back immediately to the battlefield, as opposed to anything that would return it to your hand and then you recast it. Much more mana efficient. So you can bring those guys right back into play. If a Kavu or a Zombie is killed at any point in time, you can unearth those and then use those again to bounce the Slingers. So you're going to get a lot of options for replayability on the Slinger and Sting Scourge, even though we're only running 2. I think if you were to go anywhere above those, you would really be kind of crippling the variety and kind of the toolbox that you have available to you. So there's a lot of great things that you can do with this Unearth. I really loved it in the deck. I had tried running it with a couple copies of Undying Evil as well as Unearth, and I really felt that it was an okay thing to do. However, it was, kind of eating up some space. If they didn't have a lot of creature control, then you may not have a lot of opportunities to do it. Required you to leave 1 mana open for instant speed. It didn't work as smoothly as I felt it probably should have. So it worked out better this way. Unearth gives you a little more opportunity to decide when you want to recast those. Undying Evil, you have to only recast it when it's killed. So you don't have a lot of play as to when you want to do it. Unearth gives you an ability to do it more at your own pace. Now, this is kind of the oddball card. I brought in a single copy of Yeva's Force Mage. I'm going to assume that's how you say it, but I brought in the Force Mage. This is giving a creature +2/+2 until end of turn when it enters the battlefield. I think this gives us an option for a finisher. It's really kind of an interesting card. I am, like I said, doing one of. I think it gives us a big swing ability on any point in time. It's not likely to be done at instant speed. It will not be used as a combat trick. But we still get the ability to pump up a creature and swing big, and replayability off of, like I said, Unearth and things like the Kavu will give it an opportunity to come back more than once and may help us get through a creature wall or 2. This is a bit situational. I am not totally sold yet, but in testing, it's come up once or twice and been useful. But I'm not totally sold on it. I still like it there. If you want to take this deck for a run on your own, feel free to switch that card out. Find something else you would rather run in there. It might be to your benefit. Maybe you try getting rid of that for a 3rd Lava Zombie if you want even more replayability. The replayability becomes a little slower here when you face a control deck. The difference between these spells, these creatures that return creatures, and Momentary Blink is obviously the fact that Blink is done at instant speed. So you can use Momentary Blink or Cloud Shift in response to an opponent killing a creature. With this deck, it's all done sorcery speed, so if you go to return something, then your opponent can kill it in response. Say my only creature on the field is a Phyrexian Rager. I cast the Lava Zombie, and in response to its ability hitting the stack of returning a creature, my opponent kills the Rager. Well, then I'm required to return the zombie to my hand. These cards cannot be played unless there is another creature on the field. that can be returned. So that's kind of why this is running a bit of a heavy creature base. It's running 25 creatures. It's almost necessary to have something to return, because if you don't, then these are going to be useless. You can't get them into play. So the control matchups are definitely a little more difficult for this, and that's perhaps why this may not become a competitive list at any point. There's a lot of really good control decks out there right now that interact on the battlefield. Mono blue control. Mono black control. Mono blue doesn't really interact with the field. Mono black is strong, and we also have, of course, Is It Post with Flame Slash and Lightning Bolts, and you also get Demir Post is kind of stepping up right now. There's a lot of stuff. Goblins is even making a bit of a comeback. I wouldn't say a huge comeback, but we're starting to at least see it every once in a while now. So there's a lot of options for good control decks that could cause you a lot of trouble if they play smart. So we're going to, for now, call this casual. There's no sideboard or anything like that. We filled out the remaining spells here. Now, obviously, I went with Terminate. I think it's a good option. It's a great, another one of those underplayed cards. It's, a kill spell if you compare to like Doomblade or Terror, something like that. It does not have the non-black requirement to it, so it can kill any target creature, and it cannot be regenerated. So it's really great. And the drawback there is, opposed to being specific and saying non-black, the drawback to Terminate is the fact that it requires a black and a red cost to cast. We're also bringing in Lightning Bolt, most of the time going to be used as creature kill, but it can definitely be used as an opponent finisher. There are times where I had to win a game off of a Lightning Bolt or get to Slinger or both in order to direct damage my opponent and do this just that last little bit, because we run into a creature wall that I cannot get past. In a similar manner, I brought in Flame Jab. Now, one of the main things here was Gatecreeper Vine and Horned Kabu, and this allows you to really build up your mana base. It helps you find the colors. It really allows you to play 3 colors. But what really comes into effect here is the fact that Gatecreeper Vine is going to continue to get you lands. Now, I did say earlier that you really want to be around 6 to 8. Even 8 is a bit high, so you want to have enough lands in the field that you can play at the same time a Lava Zombie and a Rager. So 6 is kind of your ideal place to be. Once you go beyond that, you may find yourself in a lot of situations. We are running 23 lands, which is a little bit low, but you still can find yourself drawing a lot of cards off these and fetching a lot of lands off the vines. And so you may have a lot of lands in hand. Now, what Flame Jab does is it allows you to turn those extra lands into a little bit of damage. It only hits for 1, which is, not great, but my other option was Raven's Crime. I really, like I said, did not want to focus more on discard. I felt that Ravenous Rats was enough. The bounce off of Lava Zombies or Unearth is going to give us even more discard, and I think going beyond that, it's not as effective. I had 1 slot open. I really wanted Flame Jab to be that slot. It allows us an opportunity to kind of give us that combat trick where we can, and again, this is all sorcery speed, so it's not as effective, but it gives us that combat trick where after combat we can do that 1 additional damage to finish off a creature. We can use it to kill off those 1 toughness creatures early. We can use it to quickly finish off our opponent, and really, like I said, just turn, most importantly, those extra lands into some damage and do something with those that is more effective than just holding him in hand or playing him. Because if you get to that point where you're playing and you got 8 lands, 10 lands, more than that, it's useless. You don't need the mana curve on this deck. Let's check it out here real quick as we're finishing up. The mana curve on this deck is really low. Your highest is 3, so 23 lands even is a bit tough. I would love to bring in something like Evolving Wilds to thin it out a little, but what that's going to do to you is really slow you down. You've already got 6 lands that we're using that enter the battlefield tapped, and when you're running 3 colors, you reduce your odds of finding one of the actual colors you need. So it's not as effective. I think it's best to not use those. So Flame Jab gives us a great opportunity to kind of reuse those lands and make an effective use. Like I said, you don't have to go anywhere beyond 8 if you really, really want to. And 8 is, an opportunity where you have the ability to play a Lava Zombie and a Rager, or whatever your combination of 2 creatures is here, and still have mana left over for a Terminate. And that's, like I said, that's kind of your ideal spot. You don't want to go any higher than that. And after that, you can use the Flame Jabs, like I said, bring your opponent down. It's not really a big finisher, but what it does do is give you a little bit of extra firepower. This deck can struggle in kind of the late game because of the fact that it is kind of based on a lower curve. Lower curve decks, you want to be fast, and this, has the ability to be relatively fast. You've got these big creatures for a low cost. You're ramping yourself up to mana, so you're not missing drops. I mean, it's not necessarily accelerating, but you're not missing your drops. You should be able to make them on almost every turn. And you should be able to get your opponent down really low, and then if necessary finish them off thanks to Slinger and Lightning Bolt. Even the lava zombies in the late game can be even more important because of the fact that they have that ability to pump up. So the toughness isn't great. They will possibly die, but you have that ability to pump them up and swing through for a large amount, and use things like unearth to bring it back after it dies. So I guess the only last thing I want to mention here is the guild gates. I did bring in only 3 of each. I feel that going over this is terrible, and even if I update this deck when we get Gate Crash and bring in Golgari Guild Gate, I would bring out 2 copies of these and keep it at 2 of each. I think 6 is a really good spot for them. Once you bump these up even further, like I said, you're really slowing down the deck because of the fact that these enter the battlefield tap. This is, again, a low mana cost curve, and you really want to be able to move relatively fast. So when you have these lands that come into play tap, it's going to slow you down. Say you have basic land plays on turn 1 and 2, and turn 3 your only land available is a Guild Gate. This means that you're going to miss your drop on a Rager or a Slinger or a Zombie, and that's not what you want to do. You want to be able to make plays every turn and not miss a beat. And so I think pushing your deck beyond this and moving to that point where you're running 8 or more of these guild gates is going to slow you down significantly. I know that things like Izzet Post can get away with running that many tapped lands because it is definitely a mid-range deck, and it uses the Glimmer Post to bring it up a notch and keep it in that mid to late game and allow it the opportunity to survive, which we don't necessarily have. We want to be a little bit fast here. This is not a Goblins fast deck, but it is definitely a deck that wants to be playing in the mid to early game. So I think that about covers it. What I'm going to do, we're of course going to have some videos for you guys to check out how the deck works.